Moving on to the next session, Nazia Erum is back with us, Mothering a Muslim. She's the author of the critically acclaimed book that opened primetime discussions on television and hit front-page headlines in newspapers. She will be in conversation with Arunava Sinha, who has won the Crossword Translation Award twice. He translates classic and contemporary Bengali fiction and non-fiction into English. Nazia Erum.
Hi, good afternoon. We're about to begin. Hello, Nazia.
Hey, Arunava.
How was lunch?
Good.
Good. I am afraid that our discussion after lunch may not be the kind that most people prefer. We are on a sensitive subject, a difficult subject. And I'm going to start by introducing your book a little bit and then saying something very personal to you. Nazia's book is named Mothering a Muslim. As if you just pause for a moment to think how important those terms are, the first question that arises is, why does a book need to be written with this title? Why is the question of mothering a Muslim child suddenly relevant in India in 2018? When you read this book, you will realize why. But perhaps the greatest source of, and really my vocabulary fails me here, but the greatest source of despair for me was the series of examples that, Nazia, you've given of how children from Muslim families face extraordinarily abusive behavior from, believe it or not, other children, from children who are the same age, who go to the same schools, who very often come from the same social backgrounds, and yet these children are suddenly identified as being Muslim, which in many cases is a synonym for being Pakistani, and then they face mental, emotional, and physical abuse of a kind that you know existed, but which becomes very difficult to accept when you read about it page after page after page. For this book, Nazia traveled around the country. You visited more than 20 cities?
12.
12 cities, and you spoke to more than 100 families.
200 families.
200 families. And most importantly, every incident, the schools are mentioned, so we know exactly where these incidents took place. And I'm going to take this opportunity now to say that many of us who have known about this but who have been silent are complicit. And we owe you an apology. We owe all the children an apology. We owe everybody who's been victims of this behavior not only a very big apology, but we owe them the assurance that each of us must do what we can to ensure that this does not go on. And I speak, I think, for everybody who's present here and for a large number of people who are not here, but who would be aghast to know of the nature of the things that are going on here. So,
Thank you for saying that. But I believe people don't know this yet.
yes,
People still believe कि अभी इतनी बुरी भी नहीं है. Like my cousin said when I set off to write the book, my own cousin said कि things are not that bad. So I believe if we still want to not have this conversation, we still want to believe that, as a country, we don't want to talk about things that don't make us comfortable. We don't want to talk about sex. We don't want to talk about homophobia. We don't want to talk about Islamophobia. In fact, we want to believe it's a Western concept. India, mein we grew up, as we were talking earlier, we grew up on, Ek Anek and Akbar Amar Anthony and all those glorified concepts of secularism. We don't want to believe we are very far from those concepts anymore, but we are.
So let's begin with you telling us any one of the stories that you want to, which exemplify the kind of thing that you've written about.
There's no one story.
Sure, but which
there's no one
exemplifies.
story, but you have to kind of look back at things. If you look at many stories and how things have changed. So I remember this lady from Mumbai, Dr. Waris, who So when her child was 5, 6, so he's again in his mid-40s now, so going back 40 years. So when he was 5, 6, he would have the Maulana Sahab who would come and teach him Quran. And he would also say things like, you know, Muslims don't lie, Musliman jhoot nahi bolte, ladai nahi karte, they don't fight, vagara, vagara, which are universal human values, which we all hand down to our kids. So now this child, because in his family, he never heard you are a Muslim or your best friend is something Hindu or something else. This compartmentalization was not in his head. So he took Musalman to be a word that stands for these values. If you don't fight, if you don't lie, you are a Musalman. So when he had a guest over, he goes up to the guest and he says, Moti uncle, aapko pata hai, mere class mein sab Musalman hai. Everybody is a Muslim in my class. Except Abrar or Irfan, because they fight a lot. Everybody else is a Muslim. So that is the India we grew up in. Not really knowing the meanings of these words when you're that young. But in the book now, you'll find stories that, and these are not hand-picked, cherry-picked stories. You'll find these across every school, every house, where 5-year-olds have a conversation, are you a Muslim? And the answer comes, yes, I'm a Muslim, but I don't eat beef. Or the other child says, you are a Muslim, I hate Muslims. And they start having a physical confrontation. So it's not just alarming, but it's deeply, deeply disturbing of how far we have allowed things to happen. For me, it's important to say that these are happening with 5-year-olds because it's much worse when you're 10 and you're 15 and this goes unchecked. Because as I said, we don't want to have these conversations. We think 5-year-olds are too young to channelize hatred. But they are not. And if we don't address it there and then, if we do not have this conversation, we think it's the fringe. We think it's somebody else who's teaching hatred or who's passing down prejudices and biases. But it's not somebody else. That is what my research told me. That it's not somebody else, it's your house, it's my house, it's the best of schools. I put a list at the end of the book of the schools where this is happening because it was important for us, it was pertinent to recognize the fact that it's us, it's not somebody else. It's not just somebody screaming on the television set, it's not just in your political rallies, it's in our classrooms, in our playgrounds, it's in our drawing rooms.
Yeah, and so, you talked about the fact that it was different earlier, you gave that example, and you have written about things, for example, where when a terrorist incident takes place, one child turns to another, a Muslim child, and says, ye tumne kya kar diya? So this whole assumption that, you are Muslim, therefore you are a terrorist, and therefore you are in some way. Now, it seems like a long journey to go from our so-called secular childhoods to this, but while it's probably almost certainly been accelerated over the past 5 years, but to a point where this kind of behavior is now not only sanctioned, but actually valorized. You are actually told you've done a great thing if you've addressed a Muslim this way. But do you not see the roots going back deeper? Do you really feel that this secularism of the past was genuine or that it was, a facade?
I don't know, because while I was young, if somebody would say something like this, an adult would be very quick to say that, no, don't say that. Today adults don't. Like the example you just gave me of from the book where the child was, so what happens is that post a bombing that took place in Europe, the next day the kids are in the school and this child is 10 and he's sitting in one of those international schools and this child is sitting there. And the teacher walks in, picks up the newspaper, and reads out the headlines. So many killed in a bomb blast. And the teacher says, what is happening to this world? She exclaims, and she sits down. So there's a 2-minute silence. She just sits down. And then suddenly a voice from somewhere in the back of the room comes. And there's only one Muslim child in the class who's sitting. And the voice says, Saad, ye kya kar diya tune? What have you done? The child is as if the child was part in execution of the bombings. And the child sits there and tells me, and I still remember, these are not stories from me, these are actual children and mothers who sat next to me and told me these stories, and I've like cried with them. And the child says that I kind of waited for my teacher to object, kind of waited for my teacher to address it, because it like kind of hung in the air. There was this little bit of silence around, and there was this one exclamation that has come out. He said, I didn't know how to answer it. I was red, I was looking down. He said, I just felt so helpless. And the teacher sat there. A few seconds later, she got up and she resumed class. I believe we adults are the ones to blame, because we are the ones who are failing our kids. We are not hand-holding them in the way we have to. Because silence is complicity. We are aiding and perpetuating this design of this narration that is happening around, the narrative that is formed, that it's okay to hate a Muslim. It's okay to blame a Muslim. And it's not okay to be a Muslim. I think we adults are failing. Or, you know, we lack so much of nuance. The example I was giving you earlier. So, two kids fought in school. And the mothers are connected through a class WhatsApp group. I'm sure all the mothers here would know how terrible those WhatsApp groups are. And we don't want to be a part of those groups, but we are. But it kind of helps you to be know of things. So this mother reaches out to the other mother, and she calls her up. And she says that, you know, our children fought today, and your child called my child a terrorist. So the other side, pat comes the reply. So what? Your child also called my child fat?
As though the two are the same thing.
As though the two are the same thing. So fat and terrorist. So nuance. As I said, are we really adulting the way we need to? But growing up, I remember this was not the way. I think, as I said, the narrative around us have formed that it's okay for these things to be said. Stereotypes and prejudices that we always held and that were, passed off, or we would hear with one ear, those have become facts of life, as if they are true.
So, I can understand that an 18-year-old may be getting inputs from all over the place, all over the world. But for a 5-year-old to have this attitude, it has to come from their home, maybe from their teachers as well. There cannot be any other place, right? If it's coming from their friends, those friends are getting it from their homes. So what do you think, or what do you know about the kinds of conversations that are taking place in these families to which these aggressive children belong?
I've not put a bug in everybody's houses, so I don't know what conversations are happening there. But there's something rather disturbing in the conversations that are happening there. Because even parents who say that this is not the way we are bringing up our kids, this is not the way the conversations in my house happen, even they say that, I don't know where my child picked this up from. Like the child who said, "Haan, main Musalman hoon, lekin main beef nahi khata. I am Muslim, but I don't eat beef." Even that child, the parents said that we don't discuss news. Where did my child pick up beef from? In the way he needed to self-explain. So it's in the air. It's very difficult to pinpoint one reason. There are probably multitudes. Be it your WhatsApp, or be it your television, be it your political speeches, be it be it a casual offhand remark, be it a subconscious way of dealing and talking about people around us. That is probably because the kids are very smart. I said this earlier that kids today know that if you're from a not so well-to-do family, you're a Bangladeshi, and if you're from a well-to-do family, you're a Pakistani. So if the kids are that smart, are we underestimating them by thinking that they won't pick on other nuances of our conversation?
No, absolutely. But my question is, do you think these are just casual conversations, or is there intent behind them? Because, if there are huge numbers of adults who also believe the same thing that their children are repeating, then surely the adults are not tossing them off as casual statements on how well India is playing cricket or the weather. They're making statements of
No, adults don't know
intent.
this. So when I started off my research, when I talked, my research was not to find out how the kids are being bullied on religious lines. But it's when the third mother and the fifth mother and the 10th mother told me that this has happened to her child in school, that's when I started asking this question, is your child being bullied on religious lines? And 80% of the people that I interviewed said yes, they had been bullied. So But every mother thought that perhaps their child was, you know, probably just happened with them. Probably it's just one-off, you know. Maybe it's just, you know, one of those bad days. So nobody really thinks that this is happening in such a widespread number. We are in a denial that we still want to believe it, things are not that bad. So saying that parents are taking corrective steps to
Is it just denial? It's also fear, isn't it? Don't rock the system, don't invite more trouble, which is exactly what the efforts are. To push the minority into a place where they do not come out, where they do not push back, they're quiet, they take everything that's thrown at them. Parents sort of will probably tell their children, don't make a fuss because, you know, the whole class will turn against you.
Absolutely, the parents don't, I mean, just last week, one of my daughter's preschool teachers, daughter has now crossed that class, she reached out and said that one of my close friends, who is a non-Muslim and married to a Muslim, she shared how her child was bullied and, you know, said go to Pakistan and all that stuff and called a terrorist and many other things. She said that she's very disturbed and, you know, I want you to counsel her, you know, because you have written on this, you'll probably be able to help her. You know, and this teacher says that probably it's just, you know, one of those one-off things that's happened. I said that no, it's not one-off things because you heard it, because it's your friend who's a non-Muslim, and she probably felt more vocal about it because he does not feel that fear. For a Muslim family, they won't want to talk about it. They would want to, there's a lot of self-censorship that is going on into our family, into our lives. You know, don't call our children by certain names, ask our children not to dress in certain ways, ask our children not to use certain words at certain places. There's so much of self-censorship happening. I remember the story from Bangalore, where a father asked his child on Eid that, you know, when a child was in the traditional kurta pajama, and the child said, I want to go down and play. So the father said that don't go out to play like this, change your clothes before you go down, because mahal acha nahi hai, things are not that good, atmosphere is not that good. So it kind of tells you the everyday internalization of fear. And a person who, you know, I get delivery at my home of all the non-vegetarian food that I want, so be it fish, chicken or mutton. And the person who would supply non-veg to my house, he's a very stereotypical Muslim-looking man, you know, with that skull cap and everything. So, and he would come and I would get a call from the security guard saying that, ma'am, aapka mutton aaya hai. And after 2 times I asked the chap that please say you're bringing in food. Don't specify, because even if he's getting fish, he would say mutton. So we asked the chap, don't specify, and the chap did not get it. After a while, he's like, why do you have so much of a problem? Why do you ask me to do this every time? So I told him, you never know in conversations when your bakra will become beef, when your goat will become beef for others, because the distinction of a Muslim man supplying non-veg to a Muslim house and people, you know, living their life on WhatsApp universities, it's clear and present danger for me to think that, because house helps stand in my house and say that you must be eating beef, you're Muslim. Of course, it's not like a question mark. It's an exclamation. Of course you're eating beef. And I live 20 kilometers from Dadri. It's clear and present danger for my safety if my house helps or my security guards think I'm eating beef, which is banned in our place in UP. So it's very scary to think of all these conversations that are happening around me and to see people believing those conversations. It's very scary. Indeed, day in and day out.
Nazia, you won't use this word, but I'm going to use it. We don't have to mince our words. To put a group of people in a continuous state of fear is terrorism. That's what it is.
Indeed.
You are making people live in a state of terror 24/7. And that's exactly what terrorism aims to achieve. It doesn't always have to be done through bombs.
Absolutely on you on this.
And if it begins with children, then it is going to be inculcated for life.
So I remember this mother sharing. So I keep sharing stories because, you know, it's not my child is only 4. So I keep calling my book a collective memoir because it's all the learnings from all the women that I've talked to. So I remember this mother from Bhopal who said that she was very, very fearful of a child who's exiting his teens now, because when he was 10, he was physically bullied for being a Muslim. And he left here and he had to, leave that school. It became that bad. After that, he started making friends only with Muslims, so all the kids who would come home would be Muslims. So the mother was like, we've never had, we have all faiths coming to our house. And for the first time, I see my child bringing in only Muslim friends. So it kind of set alarm bell in her mind, why is he not interacting with everybody? Then she says the child started playing violent Xbox games. She says that much of violence was, again, upsetting. She said then the child, once he had his own mobile and he was on WhatsApp, she said that he would get all kinds of forwards from a Muslim getting lynched, a video of that, or an ISIS beheading a non-Muslim. She said that in today's world, gatekeeping is so difficult. And I'm very scared about what message is reaching out to my child. Because this, it's a gray zone. And my Nana, to whom I've actually dedicated the book to also, was also a very, stereotypical Muslim-looking man with the namaz ka nishan, the skull cap, the kurta pajama, the uncha pajama. But he was a man of the 70s and the ideas of the 70s reached out to him. Today, when a child is being pushed into a corner for his identity and gatekeeping is very difficult for all the kinds of information that is reaching out to him, you really don't know. You really don't know what is going to lead the child where. Because if you look at statistics and if you go back to all the acts of terrorism across the world, you'll find most of them are done by people who are highly educated and not by people who are only, maximum number not from madrasas, whom we are very conveniently want to blame. But it's actually done by people from the best of universities. So what is about our education system and what is about our society that makes people feel so disenfranchised probably?
And I almost see a pattern here of systematically pushing people so that there is violent reaction, at which point these people can turn around and say, see, this is what I was saying. So what kind of responses and reactions did you observe or note from the children, from teenagers and from their parents? You've put in extensive transcripts of interviews with all the people you talk to.
So there are various reactions. One, of course, is self-censorship and the entire, like when I had my child, 2014 February, and if you go back, that was the peak of our national elections. And when I first held that child in my arms, and kind of look at the face of the child and you want to find a name for the child, it was, okay, I never wore my religion on my sleeve. I was traveling the world, working for the Global Fund. But when I had my child, suddenly there was this instinct of protecting her. And my instinct was not to give her a very Muslim sounding name. It came from a moment of weakness, but it was there. I gave her a name that was, that has a meaning in every language and every region and every religion. But and I find this to be something that's happening with many Muslim families. That is one side of the thing, that, where you want to censor the kind of image that you put outside. The other side I find is like this girl from one of the leading South Delhi schools in Delhi. Again, a very well-known school for the kind of ethics it has. Now, this child was studied in the same school from kindergarten till class 12. Same set of friends. They have grown up together and everything. But by the time she was in class 11 and 12 was 2013 and 2014. And the elections and the rhetorics were in place. She said that suddenly all of a sudden, my class changed overnight. These were exactly her words. My class just changed overnight. These students that were lifelong friends, they changed overnight. And they would have a conversation that was pro certain leaders, and they would stop having the conversation the moment I enter the class. The teachers would talk in terms of, of validating these leaders who were coming up and say how they were great for India's future. And I would be the only one who would put my hand up and say that, what about 2002? And everybody would turn to look at me as if, is that even a question? Why do you even care about 2002? And then realized I was the only one who cared about 2002 and Gujarat riots. So she said by the end of the year, and there were many small things, it doesn't need to be one big physical assault that will change your life. It doesn't need to be that. It's a multitude of small things that, things like on the class WhatsApp group, on Diwali, everybody gets Happy Diwali. On Eid, I'll get a personal message, not on the class group, saying Eid Mubarak, as if Eid is mine and Diwali is for everyone. And many other small things that by the end of the year, she said, I wanted to start wearing a hijab. And she comes from a family that's, as they call it, culturally Muslim. And for her family to realize, to have this conversation with her where she's saying that I'm going to start wearing a hijab. So I asked her, why? Why did you want to pick that up? She said that because all your life you think you live in a cosmopolitan world, but then you realize you don't. You don't live in a cosmopolitan world because they will never see you as anything other than a Muslim. And then I might as well start wearing the hijab so that I'm at least accepted by the Muslims because they think I'm not a Muslim. And this is the vortex that I see a lot of kids today caught in, where the world sees our kids as having only one identity, and that of being a Muslim. That's the only identity that's granted to you. While within the community, I see the kids growing up hearing, "Arey, tumme to abhi aur karna hai to be a Muslim. You have to do more to be a good Muslim." So the kids are caught between this meanings and identities. Are you a Muslim or are you not Muslim? Because Muslims think you're not a Muslim, and the world thinks you're a Muslim, and you're made to sit and answer for everything. And I find this two extreme reactions, so as it's not black and white. Everybody brings in their own history and geography to how they handle things, but it's disturbing what's happening out there, because the churning that we see in the last 5 years with kids as young as 5 or kids as old as 15, it's difficult to say where this all will lead. It's difficult to say where all this will lead.
I'm just going to pause for a moment to let that sink in, because disturbing is an euphemism. It's horrifying. It's horrifying, it's dehumanizing, and it is a deliberate attempt to create just the situation that you are predicting or that you want to happen. In your book, you also talk about the changes that are taking place within the Muslim community. Will you talk to us about that and see if you see any kind of relationship between these two things?
As in?
I mean, I personally don't. I mean, you've talked about the fact that, there was this wave of migration to the Gulf states, and from there a new version of Islam, as it were, came back to families here, which was much more rigid and much more insistent on rituals and on defining who a good Muslim is and so on. So will you talk to us about that? And secondly, do you see any, because I don't see any relationship between that and what your book talks about by way of the behavior of non-Muslim children towards Muslim?
So one, apart from the ritualistic things, the one thing I find a difference between growing up as a Muslim and today within the community is that we laugh less. We laugh less on ourselves. We find it difficult to find humor in, when we were growing, it would be, a new masjid would come up and, you hear the azan, and if the person is not reciting it well, we'll we can make fun of that person. Today, everybody, you'll be frowned on, how can you say that? Or I remember when, so my eldest Mamu, my mother's brother, he went to the Gulf, and when he came back, he had completely changed as a person. And he would, make sure in the morning he would call out all the men to come with him to the mosque to offer namaz. And my brother, being that goody two-shoes boy, and he was very good, I wasn't that good. So he would go, and he would, quickly get up and go with him, because Bade Mamu ne bola, he would go. Now while the other younger mamus would be sleeping. So I remember my eldest mamu saying that, Dekho, ye young boy, he is ready to go get up in the morning, early morning and come with me. Why can't you all get up? And aren't you guys ashamed of yourself? So my youngest mamu, who was like, slightly older than us, and he would, just plonk his head up and, just put his head up and say that, yes, sharam aa gayi. And he would just plonk back. So, you could do that. You could do that when you were growing up. Today, you would probably, get to hear a big lecture on, not just lectures being still sweet. So it's not easy. It was never very easy being a Muslim within a Muslim. But being an Indian was always very easy. Today, that has become even much more difficult. As I keep saying, you have to wear your nationalism on your sleeve for the world outside and your Islamism on your sleeve for the world within the community. So navigating that gray zone, that entire gamut of meanings and balancing act, as they call it, is very difficult, and it eats away on your productiveness. So what's happening within the community and how that... so within the community, in fact, last 5 years I've seen so much of positive change. So last year, I was, for those who were sitting at my session earlier, I mentioned an interfaith iftar that we started off in 2017, which came from a simple knowledge that only 33% of Hindus consider a Muslim among their close friends. So I was like, let's invite strangers, let's open our homes. Women cooked together and open our homes, invited strangers over, and kind of come eat with us. And because we believe eating food together also breaks a lot of stereotypes together. So it kind of emerged into a movement, and I realized the reason women from Mumbai, from Bangalore, from Bhopal, from Hyderabad, from Guwahati, Lucknow, everybody was on the same page. That we need to, get up, go out there, and put our good foot forward. Because I believe there was a realization that it is a need of the hour to get out of your comfort zone. In fact, the first interfaith iftar that we did, when everybody had left, there were 5 of us left. And after we had kicked off our heels, we were sitting there and we said, "Thank you, Modi ji." And it was unanimous. Just came and spontaneous. Thank you, Modi ji. It was a beautiful evening of strangers, bonding over food and understanding each other. And the reason we said that was because he kind of got us off our asses because of the extreme pressure and the spotlight on being a Muslim and the weird stereotypes that were pushed out. And we felt that it got us off our asses to go out there and and show the world that we are not what is being propagated. We are not those burqa-clad victims banging on doors. So there's some good, there's some bad, but in the long term, what will weigh out what is a big question mark.
That's what I wanted to ask you. Do you think, what is the solution? Because we can't live like this endlessly.
We cannot allow, see, I keep saying this, hatred will not look at your religion when it, picks up on your kids. So it's not okay for children to be channelizing hate, for knowing that it's, what is bullying? Bullying happens for everything, for the color of your skin, for the language you speak, for how cool or uncool you are. It can happen for a variety of reasons. It's just what's easy to pick on. So being a Muslim is easy to pick on today, First there was the Hamas, then there was the children were called Osamas, then they were called Baghdadi, then they were called, nowadays they're called mullahs. That's also a cuss word today. So, so it's easy to pick on. How will this play out? Because the kids, as I said, they're navigating identities that are crisscrossing, and that from the early age you internalize being on the wrong side. When you internalize that there's something wrong, because the kids, in fact, the kids don't come back and tell their parents. Because most of the time the kids think that maybe it's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
They don't realize it's a larger scheme of the narrative that's around us. They realize there's something wrong with me. And that is where the problem is, that how will that internalization of being the wrong person affect the way you understand and work around it in the long term?
But I mean, where is it going to start? I think perhaps one way out is for us actually to have a book titled Mothering a Hindu.
Absolutely.
Someone needs to write that book to show what the other side needs to do. Okay, we're going to stop our conversation here and go to the audience for questions. If there aren't any, I have plenty more. Okay, there are. Could you give we'll take one question at a time, if that's okay. So, yes.
This is part comment and part question. I would actually like to suggest that a lot of what we see as discrimination now is explicit. And I'm old enough to remember, and I've been a teacher long enough to remember, that a lot of discrimination was implicit when I was growing up and I was teaching. We had Muslims in our schools, not very many, and we never recognized what that meant. Not what that meant culturally or in religion, or how alienated that they might feel. It's only years later, even as a teacher, having come out of a school and stopped teaching, when we look back on that, we realize what we didn't do for the 2 Muslims who were in our school of 1,500. And they were there for 12 years. We did nothing. And what we did to them was unconscionable. I think negligence and ignoring people is as hurtful and harmful as the explicit discrimination that we see now, and much more difficult to counter.
Would you like to respond to that?
So, growing till date, there's not a single year that goes by where on every Eid I'm asked, which Eid is this? Is this your sweet Eid or is this the non-veg eating Eid? So, I just find that so absurd that every year I need to retell the same. All my closest friends would ask me this. So, I mean, it's a majoritarian privilege to not know about others, to not take that extra step and that little bit of extra effort to understand the other cultures and other minorities around you, because you are in numbers, you don't need to. But we growing up, we always know what's holy, we always know what's Diwali, we will even tell you the entire Ramayana and the entire Mahabharata, but that is not the way the majority lives. So I think it just takes that extra step from both sides to reach out and to understand each other, for us not to end up believing stereotypes to be facts.
Yes, thank you. The lady in the someone in the second row who had, okay, you go first.
So my question is not to hurt you. So I'm a non-Muslim. So you don't want others to bully your children because they're Muslims, and I agree to that. But why do you teach to your children a religion that calls for the persecution of Christians, Jews, and pagans, and for the genocide of the Jews?
Okay, so the thing is that if you go out and read the Quran in depth, what you will realize is that whenever it is said, it's said in a self-defense form. It was in a particular time, in a particular era when Muslims were being persecuted for being Muslims. People had to leave Mecca. Mecca was abandoned by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It was abandoned by him because they were being hunted down. Muslims were being hunted down. That's when it was advised on how to counter them, and guerrilla warfare, and everything was advised. So it was in particular time, in particular space. We are not living in that era now.
No, but
it's also written, Quran also says that if you hurt someone, it's like killing all of humanity. It also says, there are many lines that I can quote right now from Quran that will counteract the same.
I'll clarify that. You said that if one person is killed, and it is as if he killed all of mankind. But that verse is addressed to the Jews first. The starting of that verse is addressed to the Jews. And
yes, look, the point is that this, as Nazia mentioned, there was something in a particular context. I doubt very much if today any Muslim parents are telling their children to go out and kill other people.
But
I
there is a
doubt
verse
any
that
religion
transcends.
preaches
I doubt any religion
violence
does that.
for no reason.
Just clarify me if I'm wrong. There is a verse that I find transcends the
I think
past.
we can take this outside if you don't mind, because there are other people with other questions.
We
And
live in a free country, sir. No.
we can have a debate amongst the audience, it appears. All right.
There was this experiment which was done where a holy book was covered, and passages from it at random were read out to passers-by, passages talking of, the kind of passages that you just spoke about, killing this person, persecuting that person. And the people, this was done in the West, so people who were being called upon as the passers-by all presumed that this was the Quran because of the stereotype that we have. When the cover was opened, it was found it was not the Quran, it was the Bible. So all religious books have different kind of violence written about at different times. There's a context to it. You have to get the context.
Yes. Thank you. No, we will stop it there now. Yes, the lady in the second row, please.
A few good words about your Hindu neighbors and Hindu friends.
Sorry? No, I didn't get that. What did you say?
Yes. Of course, I mean, the fact that the book has done so very, it's been on the best seller list for a long time. It's been on I've seen books that have sold much more than me, but they come and go in a month. But this book we are actually celebrating an year of its release right now. And there has not been a single day when somebody has not reached out to me and said, it's the word of mouth. So it kind of gives me hope that, in fact, it's not Muslims who have read it more. It's non-Muslims who have read it more. So it kind of gives me hope and tells me how things can work out. Absolutely.
And you still do.
And I still do.
Exactly. That has not changed. And we should never.
In fact, I remember the story of a girl when she came back and told her mother that this has happened. The mother said, I'll take this up with the school. She said, no, don't worry. There are few of my friends who are standing up for me. I don't want you to get engaged. So it's not like 100% and everybody is out there to get the minorities. But what I'm trying to say is that it's very important to check the growing precedence of this, the growing incidence of this, because the numbers are everywhere, the conversations are everywhere, and it's important to stem it right now. Like people say that, why don't you go to Pakistan if you have so much of problem? I'm like, but why do I need to go to Pakistan? Aren't we like that having the kind of conversations if this goes unchecked? Won't we be Pakistan if this keeps happening? So it's important for us to understand that it is right now and right here that we need to safeguard the idea of India.
Yes, it's happening amongst us. We need to recognize that. But that does not mean that everyone is involved. But unfortunately, everyone who does not speak up is complicit. So we have to recognize that as well. Yes, there was a question there. Yeah. No. Okay. If you'll give us a minute, there was a lady there.
I've been waiting for too many minutes
now. If you don't mind, I saw her first. So I'm sorry. We'll come to you. I promise we'll come to you.
Yeah. Hello. All my cousins went to Muslim schools. But I've studied in a convent school, and coming from an Orthodox Muslim family, I'm confused about putting my children in a Muslim school or moving to somewhere like Singapore, where religion isn't given any importance, because I don't want my children's lifestyle to be confused. So what do you suggest? Schooling, to be in a Muslim school, like the rest of my family.
When my book came out, there was like World War III on my Twitter timeline, because I was not just told by the Sanghis, but also the Mu Sanghis, as I call them, the Muslim Sanghis, because of the second half of the book which talks about what's happening within the community. So, and many of them said that if you have so much of problem, why don't you send your kids to a Islamic school? I'm like, that's not the solution. That is not the idea of India. To have segregated schools, to have segregated housing complex. Idea of India was to live together and create an India that we unitedly create. Today, you are already living in different neighborhoods. Then your children don't study in the same schools. Then how is this the India that we created and that we chose?
Yeah. Yes, sir. You had your question.
Ma'am, I have a question for you. these children whom you interviewed or families whom you interviewed,
I can't hear you, I'm
some,
so sorry.
some evidence of discrimination, if you wish. Now, what happened to these children when they finished their schooling and went on to the world? You get my point? Did they carry the same old discrimination, or they got rid of the discrimination by what they faced outside? That's one. And a comment without a context for any one of the things which have been said, you cannot take the comment seriously at all.
So what happened to the kids once they're passed out of school? But I talked to them when they were in school.
You have a child who gets pointed out as you're a Muslim. He goes through the school. What happens to him afterwards? So is he still affected by these discriminations, or is the child bright enough to get out of them?
So this is not a study that was done over years to find out. I mean, probably I'll write another book after 5 years or 10 years and find out what happened to those children. And I'll keep that in mind, sir, to find out what happened about them. But the fact that growing up, you know, I remember my brother, he was in winters when he had a muffler over his head, he was called Hamas. But it wasn't done in jest with a hand on his shoulder by his best friend. But it still stayed with us. It pinched us. Why Hamas? Just because we're Muslims. So today when it's done with much more anger, with a much more vehemence, with a much more physical abuse, it kind of, I wonder how much if a jest pinched us, what will happen to these children? As I said, they stop making friends. As I gave the example of this mother who said that her child stopped making friends who were not Muslims.
Yes.
And
but let's hope.
Where does the tunnel lead us?
Let's hope that this is not the future that we're heading into. And I'm sorry, but we are out of time. So, but we can continue the conversation outside, of course. So, thank you very much, Nazia, and thank you everybody for your.
Thank you for a lovely audience. Thank you.